The next piece is a study by DionisioAguado. It's an arpeggio study using repeated notes in the right hand. I think what I'll do this time is I'll play the piece through for you, listen to it, and analyze what I'm doing. Try to analyze not so much just the technique, but also from a performance aspect, the interpretation aspect. I think you'll find, if you listen carefully, that probably have noticed the not only loud and soft type idea, but that it gradually got louder, gradually got quieter. Which is called a crescendo when it gets louder, or decrescendo when it gets quieter. So this is also a very important tool. It gives the feeling of the piece opening up and then closing down. You also probably have noticed some of the coloristic changes. At certain places I went closer to the bridge, which brightened up the quality of the sound. I did this specifically on some of the repeats where I contrasted. The first time I would do it one way, and on the repeat I would do it a different way. I think you'll find that by adding these devices, it starts to bring the music alive. It's a bit of spice to it. When playing this piece, take careful note of the chromatic notes. We have a G sharp and a C sharp. And also, again, pay very close attention to the fingering that's indicated, right hand and left hand fingering. This type of piece, again, you could practice very slowly at the beginning. It's just constant 16th notes, but you might start very slowly. Common misconception a lot of people have is they see 16th notes, and right away that means quick, means play the piece fast. That's not true at all. Depending on what the general feel of the piece, sometimes, usually the composer will give an indication at the beginning. I won't get into them now, but there'll usually be an Italian word. It might be andante, which means fairly relaxed tempo. Now, if you have a slow tempo indication, if the composer says slowly, then when you have 16th notes, they'll also be slow. They'll be quicker than 8th notes and quicker than quarter notes, but it doesn't mean that they'll be quick, generally speaking. So that you may have a piece, and it could be 16th notes, and it could sound like there's no guarantee that because they're 16th notes or 8th notes that they're very quick. So don't be under that misconception. So when you look at this piece, don't look at it and say, wow, it's all 16th notes. It must be very quick. It's not true. I think a fairly relaxed tempo with this piece would be best. Also, be careful that you're playing on the tips of your fingers. If not, you're going to have the problem on that opening chord. See, my first finger, again, is damping that note. So that's the problem. So go through very slowly and check each left-hand pattern. Next one. Next one. This one's a bit unusual when we have the B played with the fourth finger, the D, and the E. That might be a bit tricky at first. So again, be very careful, especially with that open E. It's not very clear. And keep the right hand very relaxed. The right hand plays a steady 16th note pattern all the way through. So make sure it's just da, 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 da. Very even, very relaxed. You find sometimes if your right hand is doing a lot, it tends to tense up on the upper part. You can feel it right there, and your wrist will feel tight. Relax it. If you find you can't, take a break, let your arm hang. Get rid of all the tension. Don't keep practicing and getting more frustrated and building up that tension. Take a break for a second, let it go, then play. You'll find if you start getting a bit frustrated with the piece, if you don't take a break, you start developing a lot of bad habits. That tension starts to creep in, and you keep playing with it, and it tends to stay there. And we tend to get used to that feeling then of having a tense hand, which then limits our technique to a great extent. So play the piece very slowly at first and very relaxed. And as you speed it up, make sure that your hand stays relaxed. And of course, that applies also to the left hand. That was a piece by the 19th century guitarist, composer Mauro Giuliani. He was one of the great virtuosos of the 19th century, which was the beginning of the present-day guitar. It was a piece entitled Maestoso. A few things that it's very important to keep in mind. The first two bars, we have whole notes in the melody, or in the upper voice in any case. Now it's very important that those ring for the entire 4 beats. The third bar, we then have a dotted half note, so it must ring for 3 beats. So let me play the first bar just to show you what I mean. It sounds like, it goes. Now it's very important that while you're playing this bass line, E, C, D, E, to F, that you don't in any way touch that 3rd string. If you do, you'll stop that note from ringing. So especially when you play that E note on the 4th beat, be very careful that you play on the tip of your finger and you don't in any way touch that 3rd string. Otherwise, you'll stop that note. In the next bar, we have an A note. Now that's a stop note this time. It's not an open note. So be careful that you keep your finger down the entire bar. So that goes. Don't lift your finger up some time before. Okay? Keep it down. The tendency will be that when you lift that first finger up to go to the D open, which is on the 3rd beat, to also lift that 2nd finger. So be careful about that. A stays down, and then we have G open again. Notice what I just did. Right here, which is the 4th beat of the 3rd measure, going to the 1st beat of the 4th measure. You might think it's a bit of a sort of strange fingering. We have our 1st finger on the 2nd fret, and our 4th finger on the 3rd fret. The reason for that, again, is rather than jumping, as we mentioned before, rather than leaping with 1 finger, we have 2 fingers that are free now, which can play the next 2 notes. So rather than going something like this, because what happens then is in the time that it takes those fingers to travel to the respective notes, you have a gap in the music. see? This way, you can connect those notes much better. It's more legato, we say. It's connected. All through the piece we have ideas like we mentioned at the beginning with the half notes and the whole notes. Make sure that they ring for their entire value. In bar 10, we get another example like that, where we're alternating between notes which are sustained in the upper voice and notes which are sustained in the lower voice. So in bar 10, we have an A in the bass with a G and an A in the melody. Now the F is a half note, so it keeps ringing while we play the G, and then we release it to play the E open on the fourth beat. So it sounds like, you see, we don't lift up that F note, that first finger. It must stay down. Don't go like this. It leaves a big gap in the music. And what we're striving for is continuity, so that each voice is connected. So it's a good idea to play each line separately. Play the upper melody, then play the bass line. You do something like this. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You see, we have a melody there. Then the bass line goes. You see that each melody, each line, has an interest on its own. So what you want to do is, rather than hearing them always in conjunction with each other, rather than hearing them as two notes together, hear them as two separate melodies, as if two different instruments were playing them. Also, in the second to last bar and the last bar itself, we have, again, 4-note chords. So as far as the right hand's concerned, you can practice what we've already mentioned earlier. And note that since we use the G twice in those two chords, keep it down. Don't lift it up. And G. And then all fingers at once to the next chord. Like that. Also, there's a few other unorthodox fingerings, which it's very important that you note them. In bar 13 and 14, in the last beat of bar 13, we have an E note, which is marked 3, third finger. Then we go to F and A, we slide that finger up, and then we slide that finger back down. The reason for that, if we go back one beat to the third beat in bar 13, we have our first finger occupied with that C note. Now, by using the third finger on the E, it leaves that second finger free to play the A here. And then we slide back with the F finger, with the finger that was playing the F note, which is the third finger, so that our first finger is free to go back to that F note on the next beat. So the reason for that fingering is, again, that we don't have to skip with the fingers. We don't have to break the line, break the continuity of the line. So it's very important. There's quite a few of these odd fingerings in this piece. So be very careful to follow them exactly as they're written. And note some of the accidental signs. In bar 9, we have a B flat. A flat, as you remember, lowers a note, semitone. We have an F sharp in bar 11. So pay very careful attention, because there is a great difference between F and F sharp. They're totally different notes, even though you might think, well, they're both some kind of F note. entirely different notes. So pay careful attention to all the accidentals.